Welcome to Charter California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is an episode you will not want to miss. We will be speaking with Alan Lowenthal. He is a member of the United States Congress. He is a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and he recently returned from an official trip to the Ukraine. 8 members of Congress traveled to the Ukraine, and during this episode, we will speak with Mr. Lowenthal about his trip from start to finish, which I only can imagine was incredibly impactful.
Very impactful, one of the most impactful events of my life.
You traveled to Kiev, the capital of the Ukraine.
Yes.
And your first stop in Kiev was Babi Yar.
Yes, it was at Babi Yar.
Babi Yar is a ravine in Kiev.
Yes.
And it was well known because it was the location of one of the worst massacres during the Holocaust.
Yes.
What can you tell us about what happened in September of 1941?
What happened was when the Germans had entered, they rounded up the Jews, and on the first day massacred over 33,000 Jews by shooting them and pushing them off the ravine.
Ultimately, it's believed that over 100,000 individuals were brought to Babi Yar at some point over the next 6 months and killed. For most Jewish Americans have heard the name Babi Yar. It is infamous for the horror and destruction. I know that you yourself are a Jewish American,
as am
I. And so talk to me about what it was like for you to be standing on the edge of Babi Yar on your first day visiting this nation in crisis.
Well, it set a tone. It was the importance of all of this, of what was happening, and it was very, very emotional. Our ranking member lit candles. All his family is from the Ukraine, and it just put kind of a framework as we began of what it's like when a country is invaded and a minority populations, because primarily Jews, but also gays, gypsies were all shot and murdered at Babi Yar and thrown into the ravine. So it just, it was just powerful.
What's so horrifying to me as I look at what's happening today is the Russians are saying that they need to protect Russian speakers living in the Ukraine.
Yes.
In 1938, the Germans said they need to protect German speakers in the Sudetenland.
Yes.
In Czechoslovakia.
Yes.
It's hard not to get chills when you think about that juxtaposition.
I think all of us should have chills. I think that we're at one of those moments in history when you have a person who will try to blame others and say that he's defending a population.
And that's President Putin.
President Putin, who is invaded another country and annexed part of another country.
Which you're referencing the Crimea.
The Crimea. And potentially now is talking about protecting the Russian population, or those that are Russian
and speak Russian. I mean, it seems to be that's his concern. Russian people who speak Russian.
But as you know, as I think about this, I am Jewish American, as you mentioned. My Jewishness is an important part of who I am, but it's in context of I'm an American.
Right.
That's my country. That's who I believe in. And it's a mosaic of all of us. And I see the same way those that speak Russian have strong ties and feelings towards Russia. That's who they are. But they are Russian Ukrainians. Right. This is an invasion of, even though they're Russian, into the vast majority of it, into their nation.
After you left Babi Yar, you spoke with many of these Russian Ukrainians or Ukrainian Ukrainians by going to the Maidan.
Right, we went to the Maidan.
Which is the square where the revolution
took place. Took place in the end of January when, through January, I guess it started in late December, ended, I think, through February, and then Yanukovych, who was the president, left the Ukraine went to Russia, resigned, and the Rada, which is the parliament of the Ukraine, selected an interim president and set up elections which will be this spring.
Mm-hmm. Talk to us about the people you met in the square. What did they think of the fact that 8 members of Congress had traveled to the Ukraine? Vice President Biden also traveled. We'll speak about your meeting with him later on. Were they appreciative? Were they scared? Did they see you as provocateurs? What was their sense of you?
Not only in the square, but wherever we went in the Ukraine, we were warmly greeted. People reached out to us, wanted to talk to us, whether it was on the streets, whether it was in the synagogues.
We'll talk about that soon.
Whether it was in the square.
Right.
They reached out. They were very, very glad. As the Prime Minister, who we met, of the Ukraine said, "You are the leader of the free world. We are so honored to have you here."
Are they scared?
They are fully aware that there could be an invasion of their country, and that this time they will die on the streets.
That evening, you met with Vice President Joe Biden.
Yes.
Talk to us about that meeting, to the extent you can talk to us about it.
It was a meeting where we spoke of the U.S. commitment to the Ukraine, spoke of the U.S. commitment to making sure that there were fair elections in the Ukraine, that they were transparent, that they will not be interfered with by the Russians.
But who will vote in these elections? Because when I think about the Ukraine, you have kind of, well, I'll use the term loosely, Western Ukraine,
Right.
which is fairly, those people are committed to the Ukrainian nation. Eastern Ukraine, where there seems to be a lot of separatist activity.
Some separatist
And
activity.
then the Crimea. Which
Crimea will be dead. Crimea is a much smaller population in the south,
Right.
really, on the Black Sea. The Crimeans are not, since they're now been annexed and part of Russia, they will be allowed, those that want to leave Crimea, there will be voting booths across the border right there in the Ukraine. It is not anticipated that Russians will allow them back into Crimea or without. We do not anticipate a large number of Crimeans because they will be in fear of their lives.
And
the Tatars who are there have already been discriminated
against.
They've lost their homeland.
We'll speak about them. So with
But
Vice
the
President
rest of the
Biden-
nation, but the rest of the nation, whether it's we anticipate, if it's fair, that there are many candidates from the East, that there is high propensity of voters. The Ukrainians have voted in large part, and they do vote in their elections, and Eastern as well as Western. Remember, Yanukovych really came from the East. The East has had tremendous amount of input into the running of Ukraine because Yanukovych kind of moved towards the West for a while and then swung back to the East to the West. And so it's not as if the country, just like we have differences within our country.
Of course,
but Eastern Ukraine will vote if it's fair.
think?
Yes, they will.
Because-
Everybody there, because they are part of Ukraine, and there are many candidates that reflect their interests running.
And I want to speak about your trip to the East when we come back. But first, your time with Vice President Biden.
Yes. We talked about the U.S. commitment. The Vice President announced at that time the additional aid package to the Ukraine, the $50 million additional aid package. We talked about wanting to ensure make sure there are enough monitors and that the election is a fair and transparent election, and to work with the Ukrainians and to stand up to Putin.
When we come back, I want to speak with you about your travels to East Ukraine.
Yes.
Because you did travel there with
Yes.
a bipartisan delegation.
Yes.
We are speaking with Alan Lowenthal. He is a member of the U.S. Congress, speaking about his trip to the Ukraine. My name is Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back.
Prior to the dissolution of the USSR, the Ukraine comprised what percentage of the USSR's total landmass? 2.71, 5.04, 7.21, or 11.93%. The Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic covered 2.71% of the total landmass of the USSR. Russia's land area comprised 76.62%.
Welcome back to Charter California Edition, a special discussion with Alan Lowenthal, a member of the United States Congress, about his recent trip to the Ukraine, a bipartisan delegation, 8 members of Congress, 5 Democrats, 3 Republicans, most specifically the chairman of the committee, Ed Royce, the ranking Democrat, Eliot Engel. Talk to us about the bipartisan nature of
Well,
this
Chairman
trip.
Royce, who's a Republican, and ranking
From
member
Southern California.
from Southern California, and ranking member Engel from New York worked very well together. I am very proud to be, people on this committee, people think of Congress as being dysfunctional, and there were many times when it's very difficult for us to kind of come to consensus. Not true on this committee. This is a committee that really tries to work for the interests of the United States people.
And Chairman Royce was the individual who brought this trip together, so
Yes,
he
Chairman
was the
Royce,
one who
he was the-
invited.
He not only was he invited us all, he provided the leadership role, he set the tone. This was Chairman Royce's. This was Chairman Royce's visit, and though we all took part
Right.
and we all did our part and
Right.
did the things that we were.
You traveled to the East, and
Yes.
ironically, I must say, while you were there, there was an incident whereby members of the Jewish community
Yes.
in a certain eastern Ukrainian town were
Yes.
handed leaflets
Right.
demanding
That they register.
that they register.
Right, reminding us of what took place in Hitler's Europe.
Right. That news just literally went through the global media like a
And it went
firestorm.
through the Ukraine the same way.
Talk to us about that moment.
We left, remember this was in eastern Ukraine where this is the most volatile
Right.
situation. We left and arrived in and met with some of the leaders of both the separatist movement, the Jewish, those Russian Ukrainians that want to be part of the Ukraine, the Jewish community. And with the Jewish community, it was the last day of Passover. And we met with hundreds and hundreds of people who were in shul.
Which is temple.
And who talked to us about that. Not one who we spoke and sat with said that they experienced anti-Semitism at this time. This is not, people cannot attribute it to, do not know who to attribute it to, but it's obviously a provocation
Right.
to escalate upwards the tension.
The irony is, Russian President Putin is trying to use anti-Semitism to his advantage.
Yes.
He is suggesting that anti-Semitism is rampant in the Ukraine, which is why the Russians need to come in to quash anti-Semitism.
That's right, and we should be inviting foxes into the henhouse all the time, according to. So he is the one who has created this crisis.
You mentioned the Jewish community. Talk to us about the separatists, though. I mean, there are forces that do want to separate.
Right. There are, remember, along a continuum, just imagine as we think about in the United States, from the Tea Party on one side to the very left progressive Dems, the vast majority of both liberals and moderates and conservatives do not really reflect the total extremes. I think you see the same in there. You have those that who want to see Ukraine. They have taken over they have taken over some of the buildings in some of the cities. Want to see the Ukraine, the breakaway from Eastern Ukraine breakaway and be part. They're a small segment.
You feel that? You
Yes,
really
we
believe
spoke
it's
to
a
many of
small-
the Russians, Ukrainians, and they would like to see more decentralization. They would like to see more Russian language and Russian culture protected. They would like to see maintain ties with Russia, but they are Ukrainians first of all.
Really?
And they talk about being Ukrainians, and they are of Russian descent. But they are Ukrainians, and I believe we will see out of the election that there is a strong support for the Ukraine by the people of the Ukraine, regardless of where they come from. Now, that is not to say there might not be tremendous differences in terms of how the Ukraine should be governed. Most of the people from the West really strongly want to be part of the European Union. They say the Ukraine is not moving back to the 20th century, it is moving into the 21st century. And that's probably not as strong in the East. Although people realize that Ukraine is moving in that direction, they still want to be able to have relationships with Russia, and they want a balanced approach. But the point needs to be made, we did not feel that, that there was a strong, strong movement. We walked freely in the streets, talked to people, they talked about it, that it was, no, this is a provocation that has been set up by Mr. Putin.
Upon your return to Kiev, you met with the interim president. You met with two of the leading candidates for president.
We met with the prime minister. We met with the leadership of the Tartars, who is a member of the Rada, which is their parliament.
Let's talk about the Tartars. It's a very interesting dynamic. The Tartars, as I understand it, descend from Turks.
Right.
And if you look at a map of the region, the Crimea could arguably, be part of Turkey. I mean, the way
That's
the map.
right. That's right. They are the indigenous, really the indigenous people of that region.
And so the Tartars are a significant minority.
Very so. They now represent. They now, I believe, represent slightly under 20% of the Crimea.
How are the Tartars doing in the Crimea? I know you did not travel to the Crimea,
no,
but you met with Tartar representatives.
They're devastated by this event. We met with their leadership in the Rada. It is very difficult being now under the annexation to be a member of the Tartars. This annexation was to protect the Russians, not to protect the Tartars who are indigenous. They have all their rights. They're very, very frightened of what is taking place.
What can we do? What can America do to protect? I mean, we have to deal with the Ukrainians, but now this Tartar minority.
Well, they're not really asking at this moment for us. They just were so glad we were there to talk to them, to understand what is going on, what is there. At this point, it's kind of like going through, they've lost their homeland, and so they're in great depression. I think right now our focus is, what are we as a United States, what is going to be our response? Obviously, we would like to de-escalate the situation, to have more rational approaches, that you don't use force to take over a nation. You let the people decide themselves in a democratic way. And we want to support that. On the same hand, we want, without putting any, I don't think there's a sense at this moment at all anyway, that the United States wants to have any kind of military presence in terms of its troops.
But we are in Poland. We are in Poland right now.
But we are going to protect. Yes, and we are going to be there, and the Poles have been very strong to help the Ukrainians, and we're going to help, and we're going to increase our assistance, and we're going to do whatever we can to make sure that the Ukrainians are not, if there ever is an invasion, that the Ukrainians are protected.
Are we on the verge of World War III?
We are on the verge of having interrelations that go far beyond the Ukraine. That Mr. Putin's expansionist return to a policy of where might makes right, and marching into countries and annexing countries places all of us on the globe at risk.
Should we, as part of a geopolitical strategy, cede, whatever word you want to use, that the Crimea is now part of Russia and the Ukraine needs to stay intact east and west as it is today?
No. What we need to do is to say that the territorial integrity of the Ukraine as it exists today must be protected, and we will do whatever we can to be supportive and to work with, either through the Europeans, by assistance by the United States, in any way we can to protect the Ukraine. The Crimea is a separate question. The United States will never recognize the annexation by another country moving into a country and taking it and putting it into there. We will continue the sanctions and look at other ways to make sure, without invoking a military presence, that we do not accept it and that we put tremendous pressure on the Russian economy to change.
It's a frightening time. It's the 100th anniversary of the commencement of World War I.
That's right.
And so a lot of echoes from that time. Alan Lowenthal, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for taking this trip to the Ukraine, and thank you for providing us with the insight that you have provided today. And of course, thank you for joining us. This is Charter California Edition. We'll be right back.